The movie opens with a narration from an old man who talks about his passion for drawing. As a child, he read about boa constrictors eating their prey whole somewhere in a book, which ignited his curiosity. He then drew the outline of a snake eating a whole cow and later showed it to adults. Upon asking if they feel scared by the picture, he received a rather strange answer. An adult told him he wasn't afraid of the picture because nobody would be afraid of a hat. The kid then realized that the adult had seen his drawing of a snake eating a cow as a hat. So, he drew a more detailed picture where a cow could clearly be seen inside the body of a snake. He asked once more and received slightly rude answers. Several adults told him to quit drawing and focus on more important subjects like history and science. The kid needed their instructions and left his passion behind in his childhood. Furthermore, the old man adds that as he grew up, he became more and more adult while forgetting his child self. This series of forgetting came to an end abruptly when one day he met a mystical child named the Little Prince. The scene shifts, and we see several parents and their children waiting in the lobby of Verth Academy. This is an extremely prestigious and highly sought-after institution, and people come from all across the nation to get their children admitted here. Among the several people waiting are our protagonist, Little Girl, and her mum. The duo are doing some last-minute preparations for Little Girl's interview session. Mum tells her daughter that the judges inside will only ask her one question, which is whether or not she is worthy of studying in Verth Academy. Little Girl is supposed to confidently reply that she is and list 3 reasons to show why she is worthy. It is obvious that they have previously discussed the whole thing and are ready for the question. Just then, 2 parents come out from the interview room along with their child, and all of them are in tears. Mum and Little Girl are confused at this sight, but they do not get to dwell too much on it. They are quickly called into the interview room as it is now Little Girl's turn to face the judges. Inside, the interview room is like a theater, where the judges are sitting across a stage where the interviewee is supposed to stand. The judges then begin to go through her application, and initially they don't look all that impressed. However, their frowns soon change into gentler smiles, and eventually they accept her application. They even commend Little Girl on her essays, The Transformative Power of Zero, and Zero, Still My Hero. Then comes the most important part, the final question. Mum is nervously watching from nearby as the judges ask Little Girl the question that will decide whether she goes to Verth Academy or not. To their utter horror, the judges ask Little Girl what she will become when she grows old. This is not the question that the mother and daughter duo had practiced over and over again. However, poor Little Girl becomes extremely nervous by the judgment looks of the people sitting in front of her. She belts out the same answer that her mother had shoved down her throat in the lobby. She begins to say why she is worthy of studying in the Verth Academy. She blissfully reaches the second point when suddenly, her mother signals her to stop. This is when Little Girl realizes her mistakes, and suddenly, he gets dizzy. She eventually falls flat on the stage and passes out, but not before saying thank you. Mum takes her daughter out in a wheelchair, much to the astonishment of the other gathered parents. As the mother-daughter duo are headed back, the mood takes a dip in the car. Little Girl apologies for her mistake as she didn't recognize the change in question soon enough. Mum, on the other hand, is not so down and out as she suggests a plan B. Little Girl is surprised as she had earlier proclaimed that there would be no plan B, but now she has changed her tune. Turns out the alternative path is to get a house in the same neighborhood as Verth Academy. That way they can get into the institution through the local quota seats. Then, a montage of scenes shows how Mum selects and buys a house in the neighborhood near the prestigious school. She signs all the necessary papers and moves into the new home, which is suspiciously in the market at a reduced price. The reason soon becomes clear as the mother and daughter arrive at the front gate of their new home. Turns out, there is a rather eccentric-looking house right next to them. That building looks nothing like any other home in the neighborhood, which is otherwise extremely uniform. Little Girl asks her mother if it is too late to go for Plan C, but the latter has a better perspective towards the whole situation. Mum points out that the presence of the eccentric house allowed them to buy their new property at a reduced price. After a brief look at their new shelter, the little girl asks her mother the question that has been eating her up from inside. She asks if she is worthy of actually going to Verth Academy. In response, Mum says that whether or not she is worthy right now doesn't matter. Mum plans to make her daughter worthy by the end of next admissions. For this, she has even ordered a customized board, which has a detailed schedule for Little Girl's life. Mum calls it Life Plan, as it is not only limited to the time until Little Girl gets admitted into Verth Academy. In fact, it contains meticulously planned scheduling for each hour and each month for several upcoming years. After explaining the whole thing to her daughter, Mum has to rush away for work. She expresses her desire to stay back, but little girl tells her not to worry about anything and go get her work done. Shortly after Mum left, little girl is about to return indoors when suddenly she smells something strange in the air. She follows the smell, which takes her to the side fence of her home, which is adjacent with the eccentric house. Eventually, little girl recognizes this smell. It is the smell of gasoline. Without any warning, smoke emerges from the eccentric house, which is soon followed by a boom. A huge rotatory blade whistles past the fence and shatters through the window to the little girl's living room. She watches on in horror as the blade completely wrecks the entire life plan that Mum has so meticulously planned. Little girl then goes to the window and tries to open it, but just then the man behind the boom walks in. He is an old man, the same old man who was narrating the story in the first scene. The old man is wearing an aviation suit and is clearly dizzy. He looks around to see if anyone is in the house, completely overlooking little girl who is still by the fence. The scene abruptly changes to some time later as a police officer arrives at the front door of the old man. Several people from the same neighborhood have also gathered there to watch the proceedings. From the whispering of the neighbors, it is clear that this is not the first time that the old man has created such nuisance. Little girl finally begins to realize why exactly was their home placed in the market for a reduced price. Nonetheless, the old man quickly opens the door and greets the officer. He also greets other neighbors as friends, but everyone scurries off to their homes as if they have just seen a ghost. The police officer then asks old man if he tried to operate his plane again. In response, the latter says that he did. Old man also admits that he caused a lot of damage to the neighboring house. To make up for his accident, he hands little girl a jar of coins before retiring back into his own home. That evening, Mum returns back home in good spirits as well as Chinese takeaway food. She is rather surprised when little girl greets her with a jar full of coins. Mum then asked her where she got all the coins from, and little girl reveals everything that happened that afternoon. Her mother says that they should file a case and also call in the insurance company to cover up for all the damages. Little girl, being the diligent person she is, informs her mother that she has already done so. In fact, little girl has filed all the papers for the complaint as well as the insurance claim. The mother and daughter then examine the damages done to their house, and initially Mum thinks it is not too bad as the lights can still be turned on. However, no sooner than she switches on the light, the electricity in the entire house goes out. That very night, the little girl rearranges her room, keeps her gifts in place, and re-racks her book. She also makes her Verth Academy uniform ready and hangs it on the wall of her room. Instead of sleeping, little girl then takes out a fat mathematics book from the shelf and starts revising her topics. Suddenly, a small paper plane flies in through the window and lands on little girl's book. Surprised, she opens the plane up only to discover a colorful story written upon it, while there is a picture of a boy standing on a small planet drawn in one corner. The story captivates her, and she begins reading it out loud. It starts with, "Once a small prince lived in a certain place. His name was Little Prince, and he was alone." Suddenly, little girl hears a voice and starts looking down towards the street. When she eventually looks up, she sees the old man sitting on his porch with a telescope. He reveals that the story was written by him and guesses the little girl needs a friend just like he does. Startled, she closes the window and throws away the paper plane in the dustbin. The next morning, the rat race begins once more. The mother and daughter wake up exactly at the same time, strap their smart watches and head to the bathroom to brush their teeth. Mum says they can meet during lunchtime, but little girl reveals that she plans to use that time to count the coins. Shortly afterwards, Mum leaves for work but finds a letter and a flower placed on her car's windshield. She picks it up, and obviously it is from the old man as the letter contains a rather quirky apology for all the damages he did to their brand new home. Old man sneaks up to the fence dividing their house and nervously watches Mum read the apology letter. He is hopeful that this would be the beginning of their long friendship. However, Mum quickly throws the letter as well as the flower in the dustbin, dashing any hopes of reconciliation. She then gets into her car like nothing happened and heads to work. Inside, little girl is gearing for a hard day ahead. She looks at her elaborate life plan, sets her timer on her smartwatch, and gets to work. She does her usual routine of exercise, breakfast, and then sits down at her table for usual rounds of studying. Later that afternoon, during her lunchtime, little girl decides to examine the coins the old man had given her. She starts to sort them out in smaller bundles when suddenly something pricks her finger. She examines the bundle she had just sorted out and finds a sharp tack in it. Little girl then fears there may be some similar things in the coins and spreads them across the table. There, she discovers intriguing items: pins, crystal balls, a small plane, and a doll representing a prince. This reminds her of the discarded story, and she retrieves it from the dustbin to read further. In the story, the old man's narrative continues, describing his own loneliness growing up as a kid. He later became a commercial pilot and even started flying his own smaller plane to travel around the world. One day, his plane crashed in the Sahara Desert, leaving him stranded in the desolate atmosphere. Unexpectedly, a boy appeared there soon with a rather strange wish. The boy wanted the old man to draw a picture of a sheep. Though initially startled, the old man obliged, crafting various sheep that failed to satisfy the boy. In frustration, he built a box with 3 holes, which the boy surprisingly adored. The story abruptly ends there, leaving little girl curious about what happened next. Driven by her curiosity, she ventures to the old man's house through the hole in the fence that the airplane's blade made a day ago. His garden is filled with interesting objects, including old bicycles and their tires. The old man is busy repairing his plane when little girl approaches, startling him. The sudden fright causes his parachute to open accidentally, much to little girl's amusement. They share a laugh as the parachute gently lands on them. Following this, little girl eagerly inquires about the boy in the desert, questioning his whereabouts and his parents. The old man, however, is busy with something or the other around his home. He enters his living room, closely followed by little girl, who sees an awe-striking sight. The old man's house is full of books and souvenirs and paintings that adorn the wall carelessly. She notes that this is a fire hazard, but the old man doesn't seem to care for such things. Nonetheless, the little girl and the aviator continue to read and play together without the mother's knowledge. The aviator tells the girl about the little prince's home, asteroid B612, covered in baobab sprouts. He states that after clearing away the sprouts, the little prince found and nurtured a rose into maturity. Despite becoming his friend, she was rather selfish, which caused the little prince to travel to elsewhere with a flock of birds. After meeting some adults on other asteroids, he eventually landed on Earth, meeting and taming a red fox. After a while, the fox bid goodbye to the little prince, advising him to always see with his heart. The aviator gives the girl a stuffed fox as a gift, telling her that he will leave soon to go find the prince. The two decide to go out for the little girl's birthday. When pulled over by a police officer, the aviator is revealed to have no license, and the officer returns the girl home. Realizing that she has not been following the plan, her mother redoubles her daughter's assignments. Nevertheless, the girl continues to read the story of the little prince, secretly visiting the aviator to find out the story's ending. The aviator tells her that the little prince had succumbed to a venomous snake bite in order to be reunited with his beloved Rose. Although the aviator assures the girl that he firmly believes the little prince succeeded, she is so upset by the dark twist to the story that she wishes she had never met the aviator or heard the story. Towards the summer's end, the aviator is hospitalized. The little girl believed it was all her mother's fault, and she never wanted to see her again. Wanting to put things right, the girl sets off in search of the little prince. Escaping through the gutter, the girl, accompanied by her now conscious stuffed fox, probably the reincarnation of the real one, and the little prince's story pages, flies the aviator's now fixed plane into space. They find all the stars mysteriously gone, all the while landing on an asteroid populated by workaholic adults owned by the businessman from the little prince's story, who captures and holds all the stars to power his asteroid and belongings. After encountering a police officer and an elevator operator, the conceited man and the king from the story, they finally find the little prince, who has become an adult named Mr. Prince and works as a janitor for the businessman, having no recollection of his past. Mr. Prince accordingly takes the girl to an academy where she is to be reconditioned as an adult by a machine controlled by a sinister teacher. Recognizing the drawing of his sheep's box from the aviator's pages, which he still kept the original, due to his amnesia, he believed that it might be important. Mr. Prince begins to recover his memories and saves the girl from the same fate that he had by putting the teacher in the machine instead. They escape together and liberate all of the stars from the businessman's glass vault, which return to their rightful place in the sky. The girl and the fox then take Mr. Prince back to B612, which is overgrown with baobabs. They find the rose dead, but seeing her image in the sunrise, the baobabs disappear, and Mr. Prince turns back to his younger self, giving him renewed hope. The girl and the fox return home, accompanied by another flock of birds. The next morning, the girl and her mother visit the aviator in the hospital. The girl presents him the formerly loose pages bound together as a book, along with all the formerly missing parts filled in. The girl afterwards begins her studies at Vert Academy and reconciles with her mother, who changed. Both of them happily stargaze one night, while the little prince and the aviator are heard laughing joyfully together on asteroid B612.